The spring equinox was last Thursday, so it is officially springtime. And you can see by these flowers down here that everything is suddenly coming into bloom. Doesn't it make you feel absolutely amazing? In today's video, as we approach the end of March, we give you 4 seeds to sow now. So from our 11 seeds to sow in March, we have just 4 left to sow. We're going to start with the melons. I'm going to start with a new variety for us, which is Mangamel. I'm just going to lay the seed on the top, like so. And I'm just going to push it in.
Only 4 seeds in that packet.
That's all there was.
Ooh, no pressure, 4 seeds.
Now it does say that this is an F1, so that should have some quite good growing characteristics. So I'd be interested to see how that does. You just simply cover them over with some vermiculite. And of course, most importantly, do make sure you put the label in. Because when these all first start to germinate, believe you me, they all do look the same. And we shall get them into the water bath. Someone did make a comment on, I can't think which video it was, but they did ask about how long does it take for the water to soak up into the pots. Well, it depends on what size pot you're using. I generally leave them there for a good 30 minutes or so. You will know because the vermiculite that we put on top, that will change colour from a very light colour to a slightly darker colour. If you're not using vermiculite, it's the same with the compost. It will go from a light colour to a slightly darker colour. And if you just use your finger and press the top, you'll know if it's watered. The next variety is a variety called Hearts of Gold. And Hearts of Gold we grew last year. It was probably the most successful one that we did, wasn't it, Mrs. W?
It was, yes. Yeah, and it tasted really lovely, actually.
Yeah.
Not huge fruits, but nice flavour and everything.
Oh, yes. Next, it's the turn of the watermelons. And this one is Sugar Baby. We grew this one last year, but not very successfully. But I do really like the look of these watermelons, and from you guys that managed to successfully grow it last year, you told me it really is a lovely watermelon. And then last but not least, a new variety to us, which is Little Darling. They look really good too. I'm actually starting 5 of each variety off. I don't need 5 of each, but hopefully it increases my chances of getting a couple of each plant at least. Let's get those labelled. And that is the melon sown. Another job out of the way. Off camera just a little while ago I actually sowed some red cabbage seeds. We don't need very many. I tend to grow 2 or 3 during the summer months, and then I'll sow again a bit later and they will harvest during sort of November time when Mrs. W wants to use it for her Christmas recipes. But during the summer months, she does like to make a coleslaw. So I'm just sowing some golden acre, which is Primo 2. Haven't grown Primo in years, Mrs. W. In fact, it was one of those cabbages that my father always used to grow. Said, Primo can't beat its son.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that he did. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of years since I've grown that variety. But they are a really good drumhead, tightly packed cabbage head that you can slice up. It's white and goes lovely against the red of the red cabbages. I know in the comments that one or two of you have asked how the potatoes are getting on. Well, there they are. They're doing very nicely, and very much looking forward to an early crop from these, hoping to be eating these round about the end of April, beginning of May.
These were our January sowing, weren't they?
Yes.
Planting, I should say, probably. And these are our February, which, as you can see, they're coming through, but they're not quite as advanced as the January. But all doing well.
And in many ways, they'll probably catch those up quite rapidly, because it is much warmer now, isn't it? In this polytunnel, it's about 24 degrees at the moment by day.
Yes, it is.
And the nighttime temperatures have actually been higher as well, haven't they?
Yes.
Now, for our carrots this year, I'm going to be doing them 3 different ways. I've been asked about, can you grow them in containers? How do they grow in the open ground? But also for myself and Mrs. W. We have that competition to enter back into. And I want to be able to grow some nice uniform carrots. Let's see if we can make a good sweep of this, Mrs. W.
Let's try.
First variety I'm going to sow is a variety called Nonce. They're a nice, really lovely carrot, cylindrical and straight. And we're going to sow them into these 30-litre containers. Exactly the same ones that we use for the potatoes. And it is more than possible to be able to grow carrots in these containers. And, you know, if you don't really have a garden, but you'd like to have some nice fresh carrots, it's a great way to do it. They can just sit there on your patio, as long as you ensure that they don't dry out and you keep them well watered, then you'll have a nice harvest of carrots. The other advantage is that these are not too heavy, and you can actually elevate them, which will help with the carrot root fly. The best way that I've found to be able to grow carrots in these containers is to simply with your finger, you could use a dibber, but I tend to use my finger, find your starting point on the edge, and then just make a snail. And all you need to do now is to sow your carrots as thinly as possible into the drills that you've made. It's not an easy job to do, I appreciate that, but the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. Or in my case, maybe not so good.
This is usually the point where he says, Mrs. W, can you take over and do that for me?
That point is rapidly approaching. And I'm just going to cover them with a bit of compost. When we sowed the melons, we actually only had 4 seeds of one of the varieties, didn't we?
Yeah, mango mel had the packet only had 4 seeds, didn't
That's
it?
the one. So I had this compost left over. So let's just sprinkle that over there like so. We should give them a good drink of water, and we shall then cover them with a piece of old glass that we've got, just to keep the humidity high in there and to keep the water in until they germinate. They will remain in here in the polytunnel until they germinate, which is a really good thing because it's nice and warm in here, so it shouldn't take too long. But if you're just want to be doing container gardening, just leave them on your patio and just cover them with some things so that you get the same effect, and they should be through within the next 10 to 14 days. And it's important that if you're going to grow carrots in containers that they have a good depth to them. This may be a little excessive in this 30-litre container, but the depth really does need to be at least 18 inches. Otherwise it simply won't be deep enough for the carrots to be able to form, and you'll never get the carrots that you want. And then while we're on about container gardening, this is a kind of container. It's a raised bed, and we've found that we can grow some really fantastic carrots in here. All I've done is just made a drill about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, pre-watered it because it's actually been surprisingly dry here over the late winter. We haven't seen that much rain, so just to help them germinate I've just pre-watered the drills, and I'm going to sow them into those drills. This time the variety is Norwich. We grow this every year. It's an F1 variety, so they really do have a great taste and size. And yeah, we just love to grow this carrot. It's our carrot of choice for the summer carrots. Next, to sow into open ground, we've drawn some drills out. Hello, Poppy. We've drawn a drill out, again about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, and then just simply sow as thinly as you can. Inevitably you will need to thin these out. I'm using the nonce variety again here. I'm only going to grow the Norwich in the veggies raised beds. But this should ensure that we have enough carrots for the summer season. In the row next door I'm going to sow some Chantenay red cord. I like to sow these because they're a stump-rooted carrot. Before we went no-dig we used to sow this carrot because in our clay soil it would enable us to get carrots, because they couldn't get down so far with the soil being so clay and hard. But these are really good to use to make our trivets and our stocks. Now I want some nice carrots for us to be able to exhibit at our local flower and garden show. But also this is a bit of an experiment, because if it works well enough, this may be the way to go to actually grow our carrots. Because there's no two ways about it. Thinning, not only is it a pain, but you literally have to do it, otherwise you don't get very good sized carrots. So I'm just using this really tiny dibber that I've got here to make the holes, and I'm leaving a good inch and a half between each hole. If you think how large a carrot gets at the top, there should be enough room for that to be able to grow to a nice sized carrot. And you know, when you sow carrots out into the open plots, you're actually looking for a spacing similar to this, 2 to 3 centimetres, so that you get a nice sized carrot. In reality, of course, we don't do it, and we go for slightly smaller carrots. Doesn't particularly matter too much to myself and Mrs. W with our summer carrots, because we like to pick them young anyway. We love them when they've got that lovely crunchy, sweet taste to them that you only get from very young summer harvesting carrots. For the carrots that we're hopefully going to show for exhibition, we're going to be using our variety Eskimo. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take a pinch of seed. Hopefully there's about 2 or 3 seeds in there, and I'm just going to drop it into each hole. And then what we shall do is, once they've germinated, we shall thin this down to the strongest seedling. Now if this actually works, and we could do something like this, let's say for argument's sake in our raised beds, actually it's going to save you quite a bit of money on carrot seed, because we thin half of the carrots away that we actually sow. So it's going to be a really interesting experiment. Get a lot of questions about parsnips, people saying that they haven't germinated. Quite frankly, it's because you've sown them too early. A lot of the time seed packets will say, oh, you can sow from February. You need the ideal conditions for parsnips. They are very fussy. The soil temperature needs to be right, and the weather conditions need to be right. So I don't ever sow my parsnip seeds unless it's toward the end of March or even the beginning of April. If you remember when we did the 11 seeds to sow in March, I said that if conditions weren't right toward the end of March, then I'd just delay it by a week or so until conditions were okay. Our conditions are okay. It's quite mild and the soil temperature is good. A good indicator is when you touch the soil, does it feel freezing cold? Well, no, it doesn't. It feels warm to the touch. So we should be fine. The other thing is that always sow fresh seed. Every year you need to replace parsnip seed. It simply doesn't last. I know you get a lot of seeds in there, but in all honesty, it's not worth it. For what you pay for them, you might as well just buy fresh seed every single season, and your germination will be much better. The other thing that you can do is, what myself and Mrs. W do, is that you can see I've made stations about 12 inches apart. Bit of a lump there, so let's get him out of the way. And I sow 3 seeds. Now it may be that all 3 germinate. If they do, all you need to do is to thin that out to your strongest seedling. But it will just ensure or improve the chances of you getting something. And again, just like I did with the carrots, I've just pre-watered the holes. It is surprisingly quite dry underneath there, it really is. Of course, with all carrots, any member of the umbellifier family, you need to cover them. Carrot root fly is extremely prevalent, and it just makes your carrots look awful. In worst case scenarios, they're unedible. They make those horrible black marks, black holes, and you're just forever cutting bits and pieces away. So do take the time to cover them. However, you will have seen with the veggies raised bed and the 30-litre tub, we haven't covered those. That's because in the veggies raised bed, it's like this tall. So we grew our Eskimo carrots in there last year, and we saw very little. In fact, I don't think we saw really any carrot root fly damage, did we?
No, we didn't, and
No.
they weren't covered. That's the only place that we don't cover them, isn't it, really?
Exactly. And for the 30-litre containers, and of course, my show ones, they certainly shall be elevated. And of course, when you're growing them in containers like that, it does give you the chance to be able to elevate them high enough so that that carrot fly can't get to them. I do get asked quite a lot of times in the comments where I get things from. Things like the mesh, the piping, the stakes that we use, the veggies raised bed, the mini greenhouse that we're using. All of the links are always in the description. I always put them in the description there so that they're there for you to click on and see what they are. Decide if you want to buy it or go somewhere else to buy it. But the links are there so that you have an idea of what you need and what it's likely to cost you. They are great investments because, well, this environment mesh we've probably had for the last 4 years, haven't we?
Yes, at least.
Still working really well. As you say, at least, yeah, we probably had it before we went no deep, didn't we?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
So it really does last a long time. You know, like water, it allows water and sunlight to penetrate through it. And that is our sowings and plantings completed for the month of March. Do let us know where you are in the comments. Have you sown your carrots yet? If you have, how are they doing? Parsnips, if you're an early sower of parsnips, let us know how you're doing. And always do try to include where you're actually gardening, because that helps others. They think, well, if you can do it down there in Kent, or here in Norfolk, or up there in Scotland, then we can have a go at it. It's always really helpful. We do have a really thriving community, and every piece of help that we can give each other, it's just amazing. It really is. So please do keep that up. We so love to get your comments. When it comes to carrots, well, it's going to be about 12 weeks before we can start to make the first pickings. What do you need to do with these carrots to bring them on to a bountiful harvest? Well, if you need a heads up and you want to know what you need to be doing, then watch this video next. How to grow carrots from seed to table. Have a great rest of your gardening week, and myself and Mrs. W, we shall see you very soon.